You're listening to the radio program Today's Issues on American Family Radio. Tim, Fred, Ed, and Walker. We have a guest now. Ed?
Absolutely. We want to welcome Leah Thayer Pritchard. And if that name sounds familiar, she is the daughter-in-law of Dr. Ray Pritchard, whom we normally have on Tuesdays. He will be back on the program on Thursday. But Leah has written a book on, if you can believe this, folks, socialism. I know you thought it was dead when the Berlin Wall fell. Operation Ordinary is the name of the book, and the subtitle is Live the Truth, Resist Democratic Socialism. Leah, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be on the air with you guys today.
Well, I listen, first of all, I noted on the back of the book that you're a fellow New Englander. You grew up in Vermont.
I am, yes.
I grew up in the neighboring state of New Hampshire. And Vermont was always the hippie state. Were you weren't a hippie growing up, were you?
I wasn't. I'm from the old guard,
Okay,
but there are a lot
guard.
of hippies in Vermont for sure.
Well, Leah, let me ask you this: we probably don't have time to talk about outright communism, but this book talks about what looks like the more immediate danger, and that is democratic socialism, kind of the gradual approach to statism and all that communism and true socialism brings in. Why did you think it was important to write a book about something that most people go, well, wait a second, there's nothing wrong with voting for big government. There's more to it than that, right?
Yes, that's a great question. So I'm a former missionary to China. My husband and I lived there for several years, and in China we witnessed firsthand the destruction that comes when a nation swallows the lies of socialism. When we moved back to America, we realized quickly that America is changing. We all know that. But we were appalled at the similarities we could see between what we had experienced in China and what is happening in America today. So God placed a heavy burden on my heart to write this book to help other Americans understand what is really happening and what we can all do to make a difference, because we are living through a socialist revolution.
Leah, this is Walker. Going through your book, what are, in your experience living in China for a while, what are some of the steps that took place in China probably years ago to get them in the direction now where they are of a purely socialist/communist country? What are the steps that lead there?
Yeah, that's just a great question, because today's socialist revolution we see rising in America is actually very similar to China's 20th century cultural revolution. During that time, the communists divided society into class groups and pitted them against each other. They demanded apologies from innocent citizens. There was a huge increase in propaganda and censorship. There was shaming and labeling across society, an attack and dismantling of traditional culture, the politicization of education, and the effects of all that can still be felt in China today. What's so sad is that today we're seeing the same thing surface in America. We're seeing propaganda in media, censorship. We're seeing the politicization of the education system, and we're seeing widespread labeling and shaming. It really is a socialist revolution.
Fred?
It's Fred Jackson here. You use the phrase the politicization of education. Mm-hmm. I want you to expand on that a little bit.
Yes. Well, unfortunately, our education system is becoming just a method for the socialists to teach their ideology, all of the Marxist ideology, to our young children and students. It goes, all the way from preschool these days up through university. And so the same thing happened in China. There was a huge shift at some point when Mao took over the whole education system and started to push his agenda into the schools, and that changed China, and unfortunately it's changing America.
In order to do that, though, you have to demonize capitalism.
Absolutely.
This is part of the propaganda.
Absolutely, yes. That is a foundational belief of socialism, is that capitalism is evil, and we could go into a whole list of why they believe that's true. but it's based on some faulty theories, and they're teaching American students that our entire society, our entire capitalist republic is evil, is fundamentally evil and needs to be destroyed.
Our guest is Leah Thayer Pritchard. She has written a book titled Operation Ordinary, Live the Truth, Resist Democratic Socialism. Leah, one of the people you quote is Francis Schaeffer, who says Marxism is a Christian heresy. Talk about how, because I will say this, it seems to me that there is a segment of the evangelical community that is drifting leftward, and by that I don't just mean they want to spend more money on butter than guns, to use the old economic kind of example. They seem to want to do more than just feed the poor. They seem to be drifting towards a socialist view of everything. How do Christians get tempted to fall for what Schaeffer called a Christian heresy? How does that happen?
Well, sadly, that is happening so much. We see it so much in our churches today. Socialism truly is a counterfeit Christianity. Marxism provides kind of its own definition of sin, its own path to overcoming it, and it believes that humanity can, in its own power, create a perfected society of peace and human fulfillment. And, to Christians, that sounds a lot to us, honestly, like the millennium. And the social gospel is basically an attempt to Christianize socialism. It's a false gospel that it just removes the need for Jesus and his cross. It believes that alongside the socialists, if humanity can just come together and try really hard and put into place some socialist policies that sound really nice and noble, that we can build God's kingdom on our own here on earth and achieve that peace and that human fulfillment that we're all longing for. So there's a lot of things in Marxism that sound kind of familiar, and unfortunately a lot of Christians are getting sucked into that. But truly, Marxism is godless. Socialism is godless. It's based on the foundational belief that there is no God and that there is nothing spiritual. Everything material, what we can see with our eyes, is all that exists.
Well, it's kind of for Christians to get sucked into it, it's kind of a bait and switch. I mean, because I think there are a lot of Christians who read the scriptures, both Old Testament and New Testament, and there's a lot in there about feeding the poor and caring for them. But what happens is the bait and switch is you get Christians to say, oh, yeah, we need to feed the poor. But then the socialist view is this is how we're going to do it. We're going to abolish private property. We're going to set up a huge state. And all communist/socialist nations in the past have been atheistic. You call it godless.
Yes. Mm-hmm,
I mean, there's nothing wrong with feeding the poor, right?
Right. There's nothing wrong with feeding the poor, but there is something wrong with stealing from one person to feed another. God calls us to feed the poor ourselves. He doesn't call us to take someone else's money to feed the poor. And that's a really big difference.
Yeah.
Well, Leah, we're going to let you go. Our guest, folks, has been Leah Thayer Pritchard, and her book we've been discussing with her is Operation Ordinary, Live the Truth, Resist Democratic Socialism. Leah, first of all, where can folks get a copy of this? And do you have a website that folks might be able to keep up with additional research and writing that you do?
Hey, thank you. I don't have a website right now, but Operation Ordinary is available on Amazon and on all other online bookstores. So it's found anywhere you want to find it.
All right. And by the way, are you getting? I hope you're getting some speaking engagements. Your little bio on the back. You're obviously married, and
yes.
So you may not have a lot of time to go and speak. But are you getting any opportunities to speak about this issue in churches?
This is my first opportunity to speak, but we've had some great promotions, some online promotions, and we're getting some great feedback for the book. I'm so thankful. I'm just praying that God will use the book to help turn America back to God's ways and back to his truth.
Okay. Well, Leah, thank you so much for this fine work and the effort to awaken the church to the the existential, well, I shouldn't say existential because the church will survive no
It
matter
will.
what, as we see in China, but it is a devastating threat to the church, the freedom to preach the gospel, and certainly our founding principles in our constitutional republic. All these are being threatened by the rise of democratic socialism in our nation and throughout the West. So thank you for your courage and the great work you've done in writing this book.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be with you guys today.
All right. Thank you, Leah.